Delighted to say, joining me today, Logie's Lives, a man who needs no introduction from me, but as always, I'm going to give him one anyway. 218 caps for Ulster, 124 for Ireland. You made your Ireland debut in 2005, the only Irish captain to lead your country in wins against New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, a Pro 12 of Ulster, 4 Six Nations, 2 Triple Crown, 2 Grand Slam. He's currently working for Channel 4 and for ITV. He's done work for BBC and BBC Northern Ireland and BBC Radio, and also RTE TV and radio, and he's currently in negotiations for a one-man show with Al Jazeera. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Rory Best. Rory, how are you?
I'm good, thanks Logie. You're obviously in good form.
I am in good form. It's always nice to talk to you, a legend of the sport. What's it like, now you talk about lockdown, what's it like whenever you leave the game? Do you miss it?
It's a funny one. You get asked this question a lot, and I think when you get into your 30s and you're still playing, what gets you motivated to play is the atmosphere, the build-up of the game, the crowds, everything around that gives you that little bit of edge to keep you going, and to be watching it now for the past, whatever is going on, 12 months with none of that, it's probably made my transition a little bit easier. There's still aspects of it, of course, you miss, the day-to-day routine of going in, getting to do a job you love, surrounded by kind of, I was going to say 30 odd of your mates, but there's certainly at least 10 or 20 of them that are mates of yours, and that aspect you miss. But look, I had my time, and I was very happy with what I achieved. I was incredibly lucky to go on as long as I did, and I left on my terms, which not a lot of people get to say they did that.
I want to take you back to the start, the heritage. You and your brother obviously both played for Ulster and Ireland. Do you remember your first cap for Ireland? Can you tell the people what that was like?
Yeah, I do, and I sort of, you get the cliche and everyone tells you, it'll go by in a flash, try to take it in, and you go, yeah, whatever. And it does, and it actually seems like a flash ago when it happened in 2005. It was a strange one. It was New Zealand at the old Lansdowne Road, and the night before we got word that, I think it was the North Terrace, there was a fire in it. And how you get a fire in a concrete terrace, I'm still not sure. I haven't just quite got to the bottom of that one still. But it was closed.
Whose place did you take? Go on, tell us. You can name it now.
And so we were told that, and then we get to the game, and I was on the bench, and then to come on for about 15 minutes to go. Ireland were losing quite heavily, but that didn't bother to me in the slightest. And I'll always remember coming onto the pitch, running down to my left. It was right in that sort of left-hand corner in front of the old West Stand. And I went straight into a scrum. Simon was really on the pitch, so I went straight in beside him. And it was an incredible achievement for me personally, obviously, but for my family for them to have supported you, to get you to that point, and then to come on alongside your brother it really was a massive moment in my life.
Rory, could you have imagined whenever you came on for that 15 minutes, and obviously the great emotional moment playing with your brother, that you could go on and achieve so much, that you'd have 124 caps for Ireland? You'd be a British and Irish Lion, that you would achieve just virtually everything in the game.
I don't think so. I think, when you start to play rugby, you play it for a bit of crack, and for me it was about playing in Banbridge Minis, and someday you could maybe represent Banbridge first 15. I imagine what that would be like, and you get your first cap, and look, you always want a little bit more, so you don't want to be a one cap wonder, you want to get 2, and you plot your way through your career, and it's only when you get to about sort of mid-20s, maybe 30 caps, you go, imagine if you ever got to 50. But to get to 100 caps was like you look through your career and you remember points in time when someone ran out for their 100th cap and you went, oh my goodness me, like how long have they played? And to stay at the top of your game and to do that, I do think that's probably on a personal level, that's probably my greatest achievement, to represent Ireland 100 times, to get to do it at the Aviva Stadium against Australia, to win that game, to go out with my kids either side of me, to have all my family there. It really was perfect in that regard. But certainly yeah, you definitely don't look that far ahead and you get your first cap. And when I look back at my first cap, I think not many people would have seen me coming onto the pitch thinking this kid's going to go on and play 124
I didn't like
times.
to say.
What a talent.
But I was going to ask you, you talked about the transitions being made easier because of the fact we're in lockdown. What about the health of the game? Is the sport, is rugby, is it in a healthy position?
I think the game needs to be careful, and probably speaking as a former player, someone that's very recently former player, also as a parent, and someone that loves the game, but also from a sheer athletic point of view, like I wasn't an incredible athlete. I would like to think I was a smart rugby player, but I wasn't somebody that could run the 100 metres quicker than most, and could cover a lot of ground and just keep going. I think a lot of the boys like Hendy would say I had 3 gears and was forward, back and idle, and that was about it. And I worry that with sports science and everything that's going on and this strive to be bigger, faster, stronger, that the technical aspect of it is going out of it. And I know we talked a little bit off air about the first 2 rounds of Six Nations with the red cards, and like for me there's got to be a bigger weight put on rewarding the technical ability. For you to get, rugby prides itself on being a sport for everyone. So if you're fast, you're slow, you're big, you're small, whatever it is, there's a position for you on that. But if we allow it to go away from that, then it's not what it inherently should be, and it's not something that you would be happy for your kids to play, because it's that inclusion that really makes rugby, it sets it apart from a lot of sports. And if you make it a game for athletes who can collide into each other with no technique, then smart rugby players that aren't maybe freaks of nature in terms of an athletic stance are potentially going to be taken out of the game.
Can I ask you, is rugby like so many other sports where officials are officials, players are players and managers? Could there not be a case where officials need to start talking to players, former players, to look for the health and safety of the boys that are actually playing, the boys and the ladies that are currently playing at the highest level, at all levels actually, not just the highest level?
I think World Rugby especially are quite proactive at this, and they're probably so proactive because the Players' Union is so strong. They have a good mix of they have some of the top captains of like Owen Farrell, Johnny Sexton. These guys, Alan Wynne-Jones, are all on the committee. There's also some former players on it. I'm on it, Brian O'Driscoll's on it. And they're very active to World Rugby. Now, whether they always listen or not, there has to be a bit of a balance up. You're trying to balance up what the players want, commercially what's needed, what the custodians of the game require. But I think a strong voice from the players and recently retired players is really important to make sure that the game is put in the right place. The officials, in terms of the referees, there's got to continually be an investment in that, because I think it is something that has got to be more, like, we're expected as a player to be right at the top of your game, and if you're making mistakes, there's somebody else comes and takes your place. And I think with the officials, they've got to be able to stand up and go, yep, he made a mistake. It doesn't make him a bad referee, but he made a mistake. And they're okay to admit that. Whereas there's a little bit of, it's almost like, not me. Well, no, of course he didn't. And they find a way to justify a mistake that's made. I think everyone appreciates that people are human and people make mistakes. But when you try to hide those, that's when you get a bit tetchy. And ultimately, nobody learns. Like the weekend of the Ireland-Italy weekend of rugby, those 2 games, and there was some fairly poor decisions in that. And again, did or didn't cost the game, who knows? But I think the fact that the referees came out afterwards and said, yeah, there was a couple of errors in that, I think was a bigger statement than the errors themselves, that they're looking to move on and ultimately improve. And that's what, it's got to be a collective to get rugby to continue to, you got to keep trying to get people in and get people caught. And if you can get this synergy amongst the World Rugby, the various unions, the players, the former players, the officials in terms of referees, I think that's what you need, because people need to feel that rugby is an engaging sport.
You talked there about moving on, so let's move on. What about the Lions? Are the Lions is it going to take place? What are your thoughts and views on that?
I think the most likely outcome is going to take place in the UK, somewhere. I think there's a little bit of toing and froing that the government, potentially the UK government, has to underwrite any losses from ticketing. And if that happens, I would see it going in the UK. The biggest problem they face is just pure logistics. You know, they can't have it at any other time of the year because it clashes with other things. And rugby's going to try to, hopefully after the summer, if we start to edge back towards normality, you know, there's going to be pressure on all the leagues and all the home nations and all the different unions to get games going, to get crowds in, to get participation numbers back up. So the Lions can't conflict with that. So you can't push it to a different time of the year. If you push it back 12 months, it really affects the preparation of the World Cup, which the World Cup is about generating income for World Rugby, but also for the entire game, from grassroots to the emerging nations to the top nations. And if you compromise that, then you're compromising the entire game. So that's why they're in a bit of a conundrum. The worry is if they push it back 4 years, there's already a lot of pressure from a player welfare point of view, people trying to take pieces of it away. Like, for example, even this tour, they've shortened it. There's pressure from the various competitions and their grand finals. Players won't be available to go until some of the tours are already started. There's no midweek game before the first test and between the first and second test. That's 2 more games taken out of it. And if you allow it to roll over another 4 years, you can be guaranteed there'll be another piece will be taken away that won't be able to come back in. So from a Lions, the team point of view, they probably need to play it. I would be a big believer that it's a touring side and it should be played away from the UK and Ireland somewhere. But if that can't be, I wouldn't want to jeopardise the history of it and the actual fact that this needs to stay as an institution.
I'm going to ask you a question too. You're a farmer now, which means you're quite busy, and do you enjoy that?
It was always something that I loved whenever I was playing. You know, Dad was great because he took the day-to-day pressures off of me actually having to do something day-to-day, but there's always something, especially in the summer, you come home from a hard day's training or a stressful day's training or whatever it looked like, you get in, you jump into the Jeep and you drive around and you have this vision in your head of the sun shining, the green grass, the cows content, and you have a drive around and it's almost like a release. Gets rid of the pressure valve before you walk in through the door and are greeted by the family. And now it's a wee bit more. There's a little bit more to do. Dad's probably expecting to do a little bit more, and I'm really enjoying it. It's probably not something that I'll do 100% full time. Of so many other things that I enjoy doing. You mentioned all the media stuff, even bits like this. It's so nice to be able to get away and have a conversation like this, and to be able to kind of, a lot of the thoughts that go on in your head to air them. So farming is brilliant for me. I really love it. We're in the middle of calving cows at the minute, so it's a difficult and it's a time-consuming time for us on the farm, but very enjoyable most of the time.
For Logie's Lives, we normally do it in a studio, but we're in location, and we're not in a farm with you, Rory, and we're not in a rugby pitch. We're in a car showroom. Why?
It's mainly, well, I suppose in the current climate, it's trying to find somewhere with a bit of space to get us both in, which, given both our egos, Logie, that's not always straightforward.
Leave the smart remarks to me, will you, please, for God's sake?
But it's mainly, well, Greg Mitchell from Greg Mitchell Motors is one of my best friends. We played Ulster schools together, Ireland schools together, right up through Belfast Harlequins, and I've known Greg what feels like a lifetime, and he
says you weren't that good.
Well, you know, ironically enough, he used to be very good, and then obviously in the car game he has too much time in his hands, and he gets to the truck quicker than most of us. And but we played a lot of rugby together. We spent a lot of time together, and he was very good. He has this bit of space here and allowed us to come down, and he's been very, very supportive of me over my career. He was always at games, and he's always been the first guy to ring you or text you afterwards. And I'll say it before he does, it probably suited my career down to the ground. Whenever he moved on from Belfast Harlequins, he went across to Rotherham and sort of tried to make professional rugby that way. So it freed up the aftermatch for me a little bit more. It meant that I could try to be a little bit more professional.
It's quite interesting. You mentioned the fact that, you know, after a good game or a bad game, you have friends like Greg and others who would send you an all-important text to keep you going. The health of people after lockdown is going to be incredible. The mental health issue is there for all to see, and it's going to be difficult after we get out of this.
Massively, and you know, it's something that I think, especially sort of young men, you know, it's something that's almost like a badge of honour to go, oh no, I don't talk about that, and it's wrong, because it's actually only whenever you talk and you air what you feel is like a ton weight on top of you, you actually feel a lot better. And like shortly after I retired, I went and saw a psychologist up in Belfast, because the way I looked at it was, I would have went to high performance psychologists and sports psychologists when I played, because I went, you know, could give me a 1 or 2% that could make a big difference in a game. And when I retired, I kind of went, well, why would I not see them now? You know, it probably, when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like it's a monumental shift. But when you take a step back, you do, like, you know, leaving a career that has been 15 and a half years as a professional, and basically 15 odd years before that as an amateur, building to the professional, leaving that behind is a big thing for me. And it's a bit like now, you know, it's a big event happening, you know, going into lockdown, being stuck at home, all the regulations you have around the 2 meters, washing your hands, wearing masks, you know, all of these, how you interact with people has changed significantly, and everyone's attitude to that has changed. And I think we need to get out, we need to be able to talk to each other and get all these things. And that was, from retiring from rugby point of view, that's why I went to the psychologist. And I think the big thing for me is that I'm very happy to admit, you know, it doesn't make me anything other than sort of somebody that is aware of how he's feeling, to go and see the psychologist. I don't think it makes me weaker. I'd like to think it makes me stronger. It certainly benefited me with my family life in terms of taking it out on them, going to see somebody and talking to people. And I'm very lucky. I have a very close family and friends network that you can pick the phone up to. But the big thing is, coming out of this, to just encourage people to talk, because you don't actually realise the benefit until you speak. And the flip side of that is, if somebody is coming to you to talk, just listen. You know, 10, 15 minutes out of your day to listen to somebody can make a big difference to somebody else.
Very strong message in these difficult times. Only a few more questions to go. You mentioned family life there, you know, and obviously you're a happily married man, you've got young children. Would you encourage your children to get involved in sport at the high level that you were in? Or would you discourage them, or just let us see how it falls?
I think see how it falls. What I would encourage them to do is to get into something, and for me it'd be a group or club of some sort. Obviously I was so ingrained in sport, I would love them to play a sport, but there's also, you know, there's other things, like my daughter Penny loves the drama side of it. Actually, my son Richie is fairly dramatic as well, and you know, if they get involved in a group with that,
an actor like your father.
a lot better actor than me. He takes me to the cleaners a few times in various aspects of life. But I just encourage them to get involved in whatever it is, whatever they enjoy, whatever gives them that fulfilment in life. My eldest son Ben loves rugby, and that's rugby and cricket are two big sports, and as long as they're doing something, you know, if they're lucky enough to go on and play elite sport or elite whatever it is, elite media, you know, like your good self in the interviewing, you know, if they're lucky enough to be really good at that, I would say to them to go and do it, because you can hide away from the pressures involved with that, but like ultimately you got to meet those head on, and that shapes you to be a person. And I would be saying to them that, yeah, look, being a professional sports person is fraught with stresses and pressures and unforeseen things, but the highs are so high and so worth rolling up the sleeves and going through the tough bits.
I've got two questions left for you, and I don't know if they'll be short or long. Ulster, they're on the right track.
They are. There's no doubt they're winning. I think they're very unfortunate in that, with the way the Pro 14 was reconfigured, they're in the same group with Leinster, and only one team's going into the playoffs, so it's going to be tough for them to overtake Leinster. They're definitely the second best team in this league. So in that regard, they're doing well. I still think they've got to make sure they push on and they don't lose the provincialness about it. You know, Ulster is great, and Leinster and Munster and Connacht are all great, and Irish rugby's performed well over and above what it should because of this provincialism, because it means a little bit more to you to be from Donegal, to be from Armagh, to be from Tyrone, wherever it is, and represent Ulster. And I think you need to be really careful you don't lose that chasing success. You know, success will come as a part of that, but if you're chasing a fast fix and you're signing, you know, players that can't make it elsewhere or players that aren't from here, I think the longevity of it potentially could be questionable. I think Ulster are going really well, the academy is doing really well, but we've got to make sure that we keep pushing these guys to the fore.
Final question. The only Irish captain that actually led Ireland to victories over the top Southern Hemisphere countries. Will Ireland ever win the World Cup?
I think they're capable of it, there's no doubt, and I think every 4 years they go into it with the tags that...
That's like a politician's answer.
Yeah,
well, I think they're capable. Now, I'm asking you the question again. Will Ireland ever win the World Cup?
I genuinely think that they will. The big thing they've got to do, they've got to figure out a way to peak at the World Cup. We haven't just figured out. I think that we've kind of been okay at World Cups. You know, there's only been a couple that we haven't made a quarter final, but we always make a quarter final. But can there be the first team to get the semi-final, a final? You know, once you start to mix it up with that, then you're really talking seriously about winning it. I think there's got to be a way. There is a school of thought that thinks that the Irish players are so well looked after in terms of, you know, we'll play 2 or 3 weeks in a row, right, rest week, that when you get to a World Cup, which is very much a sprint of 8 or 9 hard games, week after week after week, can the Irish players actually front up and find a way to grind wins? You know, there is a question mark about that. There has to be, because you look at the way, like the last couple of World Cups I've been to, like I feel going to it that we're in a better position, say, than Wales. And Wales have qualified for the semi-finals of the 2019 World Cup, the 2011 World Cup. They should have qualified for the 2015 World Cup. South Africa got an unbelievable try to deny them. But so how have they got to 2 out of the last 3, and we are still talking about trying to get over a quarter final, and until they get over that hurdle, you can't talk seriously about it, but there is definitely the potential and the ability there to win one.
Rory, all I can say is thanks very much for joining me here in Logie's Live. You know, Rory best by name, best by nature. It's been an absolute pleasure. A man, listen, who graced the jersey of Ulster and Ireland and gave us so many great moments. I'm delighted that you joined us here, and thank you very, very much indeed. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Logie.